This is BBC World News. I'm Lucy Hockings. Our top stories. Thousands of girls across Afghanistan are again blocked from learning. Just hours after they've reopened, the Taliban shut down secondary school for girls, with many left devastated by the ruling.
The ones that did come, they've now been left devastated by news that we've just received that apparently secondary schools for girls will not be reopening. I've seen girls crying.
Satellite images show the smoking ruins in the besieged city of Mariupol. The Ukrainian government says 100,000 people remain with no food, water or medicine. And the women's world number one, Australia's Ash Barty, says she's hanging up her tennis racket at just 25 years old. Driven by surging global fuel prices, UK inflation hits a 30-year high. What can Finance Minister Rishi Sunak offer cash-strapped households and businesses in his spring statement? The southern Ukrainian city of Mariupol remains under siege, and there are reports that supplies of food and fresh water have all but run out. One man has spoken to the BBC after managing to leave Mariupol, and he says much of the city has been completely destroyed, although the port area does remain intact. Now, that is one of Ukraine's key export facilities on the Sea of Azov. Russian forces have now captured most of the coastline, which runs to the east of Crimea. We do have some satellite images of the city. You can see them here. They were taken on Tuesday, and you really get an idea of what is happening because there is smoke coming out of that damaged building. So many buildings razed to the ground. No people on the streets, no cars on the streets either. A similar story in this photo. You can see what seems to be scorch marks on the outsides of the buildings. You can see clearly where they have been burnt. And this is another picture we have too, which shows you the damage at a set of factory buildings and the blast areas on the ground. Around 100,000 people are still trapped in Mariupol. Food and water is running out. Our correspondent Wira Davis sent this report from Zaporizhia, where some people from Mariupol have managed to get to.
After 170 miles, mined roads and 15 Russian army checkpoints, freedom. Their ordeal is by no means over, but for these families who've escaped from Mariupol in a motley convoy of bomb-damaged vehicles, the last month has been as close to hell as any human should ever get.
It was bombing every 5 minutes, and we hadn't any central heating, gas, electricity, food, water, nothing.
Before leaving, Katya grabbed her obstinate dog, Jessie. But this isn't the first time she's fled war.
I passed through war in 2014. I'm from Donetsk, but it was light variant, really. And now it's my second war, but it is harder.
This van, filled with 25 people, also made it through today. All occupants of the same bunker in Mariupol escaping together, from ages 2 to 75. Overcome with emotion, Babushka, or grandmother Anna, says, "It's all too much for me at my age." Some of those arriving today gave us videos, a snapshot of the nightmare in which they've been living and the perils of their journey out. From the sky in particular, Russia's causing real damage to Mariupol's civilian and industrial infrastructure. It was a bombardment that almost took the life of 2-month-old Volodymyr. When a shell landed near their apartment, his father instinctively threw himself over the baby. Dad Alexei was hit by shrapnel and glass. His son, born only a month before the war, bears no injuries. After that, we lived in the shelter, cooking with wood and just trying to survive, says Alexei. Ukrainians have their differences, but the war has brought people together in adversity. Volunteers provide anything those escaping Mariupol need for their onward journeys, knowing full well that their town could be next. Wira Davis, BBC News, Zaporizhia.
Internationally renowned music conductor Oksana Linev is a native of Brody. It's a city near Lviv in western Ukraine. She's the music director of the Teatro Comunale di Bologna in Italy. Made history by becoming the first female conductor ever to be appointed as musical director of an Italian opera house. And she joins me now from Rome, where she is currently rehearsing for the opera Turandot. Very good to see you. I wonder firstly, how difficult is it for you watching what is happening in Ukraine from afar?
Of course, this is very difficult to work now because you cannot, you feel a very deep connection to my family, to my friends, to my country. I have changed a lot of my plans too, and this is really hard to be now in peaceful Europa, like in Italy. Yesterday I had my premiere together with a dissident artist director Ai Weiwei from China, very famous, and this is very difficult conditions now because every second I have to work, but I am very worried about the situation at home.
How are your friends and family back at home?
How million other Ukrainians, of course. One part of my family is in West Ukraine, in Brody. Other part of my family is in Odessa. And this is also the situation in Odessa is very dangerous because it's close to the sea, Black Sea. And only my husband is with me together in Germany.
Oksana, Ukraine has this incredible soft cultural power that we are really seeing at the moment. How do you think it can be used?
We had many hundreds years to fight against the chauvinism of Russia, and when you really think about the culture, for example, Tchaikovsky family had deep roots to Ukraine. His grandfather was Ukrainian. He was studying in Kiev-Mohylansky University. For example, Kazimir Malevich was born in Ukraine. Sergei Prokofiev was born in Ukraine, in Donetsk. Stravinsky's father was also famous Ukrainian singer. But you cannot find this information even in a Wikipedia article. And this is now my goal is to represent also Ukrainian culture, because Russia did more than 150 laws during last 200 years to cancel Ukrainian language, to make it forbidden Ukrainian literature, to bring the book Ukrainian language, development of Ukrainian art. And now for me is very important period also to be important voice from my nation.
How important right now can music be for people too, as a link to home?
We are thankful for whole world for their solidarity, because Ukrainian anthem, Ukrainian colors of Ukrainian flag, you can see in every town, city point, concert hall in the whole world. And now I am also working for to make it possible to find new perspectives for Ukrainian artists who is now in refuge. For example, we started new program Music for the Future to evacuate not only young musicians from the Youth Symphony Orchestra, which I has founded, but also their families and young friends to create new small ensembles and orchestra. And they are already performing in Ljubljana, where we have organized music camps, but we have also invitation to Berlin, to come to Berlin, to Bayreuth, to Beethoven Festival Bonn, also to Paris.
Oksana, we've seen many Russian ballet dancers making headlines by condemning what is happening in Russia. Is the same thing happening with Russian musicians, and what are your expectations of those in the Russian music community?
I can say I was really deeply shocked how less Russian artists with whom I know personally, with whom I was sharing artistic projects on a different worldwide stage, really contacted me since the war started to say a few words, to apologize, to deal with this situation. And in this contrast, when you really see how high is the degree of degradation of Russian nations, because more than 80% are supporting the war and they are happy what is Putin doing. So really this few voice, like from such a great artist like Kirill Petrenko from Russia, or Vladimir Yurovsky, or Dmitry Chernякov, and many others, it's really important that they are trying to act, to fight with us, to support Ukraine.
Oksana, Lina, thank you very much for joining us from Rome with your thoughts. The power there as well of cultural soft power that Ukraine has too. Really interesting to get Oksana's thoughts. It is time for the business. Ben is with us now, and a big day for the Finance Minister here, Rishi Sunak, under real pressure to tackle the rising cost of living here in the UK.
Yes, and further evidence, Lucia, that prices are rising much like elsewhere in the world, but there are specific concerns here in the UK. Thanks so much. That fallout of the war in Ukraine and the sanctions that have been placed on Russia continue to drive soaring prices for all sorts of things, but food, fuel, energy, all a huge concern. Now that is hitting consumers and businesses pretty hard. It's leading to a cost of living crisis, as Lucy says, highlighted by the latest inflation figures that we've had in the UK today. They show that prices rose across the board by 6.2%. That's in the year to February. It is the fastest rate for 30 years. Now, the Office for National Statistics has warned that higher household energy bills, they're up around 25% on a year ago, and high fuel costs are all pushing up prices. One UK food wholesaler says that diesel and electricity alone accounts for about 10% of their costs. Well, all of this comes as the Chancellor, that's the UK Finance Minister, Rishi Sunak, this is him, he's set to deliver his spring statement. It's a mini budget where he'll face pretty intense pressure to try and do something to ease the cost of living crunch. And while many of the cost pressures are similar to those around the world, here in the UK there's an additional problem, that planned tax rise that is due to hit many in April. So let's speak now to Mark Oswald, who's Chief Economist and Global Strategist at ADM ISI. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us on the programme. So as we said, they're a big day. Let's talk first of all about the inflation figure we had this morning. Perhaps not a huge surprise. We've been warned that prices are rising, but I suppose that headline is not one that will be welcome, a 30-year high.
Yes, and we're set to go a lot higher. By April time, we're probably going to be somewhere in the region of about 8%. So the pressure just keeps on mounting. That 8% will be in part due to the next energy price cap rise. But we also don't really know how much more pressure there is going to be on utilities, on fuel, on food prices because of the disruption from the war in Ukraine to supplies of all of this. So Mr. Sunak is really challenged very, very severely today.
Yeah, I want to come on to what he may do in just a moment, but I'm quite interested in what 8% inflation looks like, and as you said, it could go even higher. What sort of effect does that have day to day, both on businesses and consumers, when they start making decisions about spending? Do they think, well, hang on, I'm going to buy it now before it goes up in price, or do they think, hang on, I just can't afford this in the first place, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yes, I think in the first instance it may result in a little bit of hoarding before prices go up. But at some point, when you're talking about this sort of level of inflation, you actually get to what people call demand destruction. The biggest problem of all is that a lot of the price pressures are in the non-discretionary area, so-called areas which are inelastic demand. So food, energy, household energy costs. Yes, we can cut down on the amount of times we use our car, but there's only so much one can actually cut in terms of the way of heating bills. Fortunately, this comes as we go into the summer months, and that is a little bit of a break, but it still leaves households under enormous pressure. And at some point, basically, it will spill over, particularly into the non-discretionary areas, so people will go out less. just as we're coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it has an overall negative effect.
So let's talk about what the UK Finance Minister may think of doing today. And as we said in the introduction, some of these pressures are being repeated around the world. We know developed economies are dealing with similar things, particularly energy price inflation. But there's a planned tax hike in the UK that is very unpopular. There's also more pressure on the Chancellor to cut fuel duty, which is a huge component of what we pay at the petrol pump. Are we expecting that he will do that? Because he's already warned that it's not going to be a giveaway spring statement.
Yes, well, I think the consensus seems to be that we will get some sort of rise in one or other of the income tax thresholds to alleviate some of the pressure on lower income households. Whether he goes, the real issue here is how much of it is actually going to be jammed tomorrow. So we get a small rise in the tax threshold this year, and then there's more to come in coming years. The fuel tax duty cut, I think, has to be a racing certainty, because that's the one which will definitely help both consumers and businesses, particularly given that diesel is in particularly short supply across the world. But really, the biggest one would be to actually hold off on this national insurance hike of 1.25%, which really will impact, and it particularly hits the lowest income households the hardest.
Yes, we will keep a very close eye on that, Mark, and see how much of that wish list we actually get from the Chancellor a little later this morning. Mark, good to see you. Thank you.